Are we going to try to take this just right before?
Audio test.
Stand by, stand by. Hold.
Test 1, 2, 3. We're testing audio.
You're good.
Good afternoon for all of our viewers online as well as on our streaming services. In just moments, Governor Ducey will give his 2021 State of the State address.
For the first time, today's State of the State will be delivered virtually because of the pandemic. And of course, Arizonans, they are anxiously awaiting the governor's remarks.
A lot of questions surrounding this State of the State address, which we're told is just about a minute away. Again, being delivered virtually and also being delivered to members on the House floor who are now in a makeover, so to speak, a COVID makeover, so to speak, with partitions and various other precautions being taken because of the pandemic. But there are a lot of questions that Governor Ducey will have to address. Vaccinations among them, why the state's response appears still to be very, very slow. Certainly questions about pandemic relief and what may be coming down the pike from the federal government, as well as questions about what the budget will look like this year. The governor expected to submit that budget shortly to the legislature, which of course is now convening in session.
You know, Steve, you were talking about the legislature on the floor. Some legislators, they're very concerned about COVID-19, and so they will not be on the floor. Some of them casting their vote via Zoom. I talked to one lawmaker this afternoon, and he said that he will be in his office casting his vote, and they're literally doing a thumbs up or a thumbs down on their vote. So definitely something very interesting, a different take on that. And then it's going to be interesting as well to hear the tone of the governor, because if you remember last year, it was all about the Arizona way. That was what he was touting the entire time, really bragging about where Arizona was, the jobs, the economy. His team called it the most robust and aggressive agenda since taking office. So obviously a lot has changed in that 1 year, Steve.
And all of this comes as the governor faces a great deal of criticism from health professionals, hospital systems around the state, saying more needs to be done to bring this pandemic under control. Just today, Joe Gerald from ASU putting out a report saying that essentially the state needs to go into some sort of lockdown mode, some sort of stay-at-home order or shelter-in-place order in order to try to turn some of these numbers around, because even with the vaccine, it's expected to take months before the vaccine's really going to have have an effect in actually bringing those numbers down. And of course, all of this happening as the state's hospital numbers continue to rise and ICU space continues to dry up. And so the governor faces a lot of questions about that. Certainly he faces questions about what this legislative session will look like, with Republicans holding a very slim majority now in the House and Senate. So slim, in fact, that they really can't afford to lose any votes if they're going to pass strictly partisan legislation. Certainly raises the possibility, Justin, that we're going to see more of a coalition of moderates from both sides of the aisle really coming together to pass some of the governor's agenda, or at least some of the agenda that we know can get passed in this session.
It's interesting, the position of the governor right now in his own party, just trying to find footing, because some people, you know, they're very critical of him, saying that he did way too much during this whole pandemic, really harming businesses, and then you have some people that are saying that he didn't do enough. One thing that I do want to point out, just kind of the tone that is around the Capitol. The public is not in there this time. The governor, like we have said, is doing this streaming from his office in the state capitol. The Capitol right now is surrounded by fencing, in some places double layers of fencing, just as we've seen those that violence at the state capitol, or excuse me, at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Of course, they do not want that to happen here in Arizona. I did talk to a lawmaker this afternoon, and they told me that there was a meeting last week with some lawmakers about the security measures that are going to be put in place during this legislative session, especially today, since so much focus is being put on today. There is no known threat directly related to the Arizona state capitol, but obviously they are taking extreme caution with this. They do not want anything like what happened in Washington, D.C. To happen here. But if you drive past the Capitol, it is an interesting sight, Steve, to see it just surrounded by that much fencing.
Yeah, I haven't seen that really in any case in the last 18 years that I've been in Arizona. We also know, though, that the FBI put out a bulletin today saying that they are expecting demonstrations in 50 state capitals as well as the U.S. Capitol sometime between now and Inauguration Day. The date that's really being pushed around at this point is January 17th, when some of those demonstrations are expected to take place. And there have been calls for additional sieges and violence on some social media platforms out there. Some people calling for the essential overthrow of the election results and allowing President Trump to continue in office. So there are widespread concerns in every state at this point about violence that could take place in the next couple of weeks, or at least the next 10 days or so before President Trump leaves office. And so we're going to be watching that very closely, and certainly it appears that the state is taking that threat very, very seriously at this point. Yeah. We're going to be watching a lot of other things too here in this speech, however. Certainly we're going to be watching just what the governor has to say about K through 12 education. As we have gone through the last education year or so, obviously we've had a lot of remote learning. We've had a lot of students falling behind. There's been a great deal of concern about just how well students are really doing in these various different systems between remote and hybrid and in-person learning. And there's also, of course, always questions about education funding after the passage of Prop 208, and the governor certainly on the side still trying to fight the validity of 208. One wonders if the budget, if it's under pressure, we'll see cuts to education and using 208 as an excuse for that. We understand the governor is approaching the podium. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon. This past year, we've all gotten used to doing business a little differently, and so it is today. We would have preferred our usual state-of-the-state proceedings, but like so many other recent plans, it wasn't in the cards. If there's an upside to the unique circumstances, it's for this year's address. We have more people than ever watching us live across the state. What we've lost in ceremony, we've gained in citizen engagement. And I'm glad to have so many Arizonans listening, because there's much to report. On Friday, I had the pleasure of meeting with all 4 legislative leaders, Democrats and Republicans. I want to thank Speaker Rusty Bowers, President Karen Fann, and leaders Reginald Boulding and Rebecca Rios for a serious and cordial exchange. Our meeting was in stark contrast to the violent and destructive rioting at our nation's capital. It was a sickening day in Washington, D.C. that no American will ever forget. In the United States of America, violence and vandalism have no place in the people's house. Perpetrators should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Let us condemn it and resolve that it never happens again. With that in mind, let us treat each other this year as one of our nation's greatest presidents, Abraham Lincoln, suggested, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in. And Arizona will do its part to bind up the nation's wounds. Here we will conduct ourselves with integrity and respect for each other and for the United States Constitution. As for our work here, all agree the pandemic remains the most significant threat we face, and it will require vigilant attention for months to come. The risk is still serious, and so is the pressure on our hospitals and medical personnel. Even so, we should take encouragement where we find it, starting with the breakthrough that will change everything. If last year was the year of the virus, this year will be the year of the vaccine. 2020 threw a lot at us. It was a time we'll all remember, but not very fondly. Yet in a time of trial, loss, worry, and disruption, we kept our bearings and never lost heart. It's been one of those turns in life when perseverance makes all the difference, when we had to show just how resilient we are. We've also had reminders, as if any were needed, of why medicine and nursing are so respected among life's great callings. I think of Edmund Baker, a doctor and Army veteran, who for years has cared for patients in the medically underserved parts of Arizona. Like so many other doctors, he stayed on call and has never relented, so that no matter who you are or where you live, you can get the care you need. Then there's Regina Villa, a nurse at Valley Wise Health Medical Center. The mission, says Nurse Villa, is truly to care for all people. It doesn't matter who you are. It's been a time when COVID patients can't even see their families, and nurses can feel like the only friend at their side. Nurse Villa is one of the thousands who have met this crisis with courage, grace, and kindness. And we can never overlook the incredible service of the Arizona National Guard. Consider just the single example of Will Smith, a medic who in 2019 came home from deployment in Iraq. With the pandemic, Will found himself back in a Black Hawk helicopter, delivering COVID testing kits to tribal nations. That was Will's idea of a break from his regular job at Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center. In so many ways, an extremely tough year brought out the best in us. And yet sometimes, despite all, our best wasn't enough. It's a vicious virus, taking some 10,000 lives in our state alone, and has left nothing but grief in its path. With the vaccine, however, we aim to cut off that path as quickly as possible. We started with vaccinations of medical personnel, since they're the ones we count on to deliver it far and wide. The logistics of putting the vaccine within reach of everyone will be complex and demanding, but Arizona is going to do it fast. We are going to do it right, and I assure you that we'll do it with a real sense of urgency and purpose. Today, our state's largest county begins vaccinating teachers and cops. And while local public health officials are working hard, we need to work faster. So now, even more resources will be brought to the fore. At my direction, the state has launched a 24/7 vaccination site at a large and notable location, State Farm Stadium, home of the Arizona Cardinals. Everyone needs this vaccine. And the sooner we all receive it, the more quickly we can get on with life as it should be. From the very outset of COVID-19, there have been disagreements about how to deal with it. And in my 50-plus meetings with the press, I've heard endless variations of the same question. Why not more and longer lockdowns? Why not more aggressive lockdowns? Schools, businesses, parks, weddings, funerals, church services. Why not ban all gatherings and just lock everything down? It's a question that only makes sense if you forget about everything else. All the other troubles that lockdowns set in motion. The rest of life doesn't stop in a pandemic. Least of all, our basic responsibilities. People still have bills to pay. Children in need of schooling. Businesses to run, and employees who depend on them. There are lots of men and women who don't have the option of remote work and don't receive uninterrupted direct deposits. To make a living, they have to show up somewhere. And if the doors are closed, then at a certain point, they are never going to open again. If we're really all in this together, then we have to appreciate that for many families, lockdown doesn't spell inconvenience. It spells catastrophe, zero income, inability to make a payment, eviction, foreclosure, and real personal anguish. Often these past 10 months, likewise, I met in this office with public health experts who were describing the broader impacts of COVID-19 beyond the disease itself. Opioid abuse, alcoholism, addiction, mental health issues, the sheer loneliness of isolation, suicide. There has been no daily count of these human costs, but they are real and they are devastating. And extreme measures by well-intentioned people have unintended consequences that actually do far more harm than good. We never did a lockdown in Arizona. We were targeted and thoughtful. So some have asked, why not end the public health emergency? It's simple. Because we are in a public health emergency. I've been entrusted by the people of Arizona with this responsibility. I'm not going to hand over the keys to a small group of mayors who have expressed every intention of locking down their cities. And by the way, look at the experience of the other states that did lock down. What do they have to show for their strict mandates and orders? They're still dealing with the worst of it, just as we are. I'm well aware that taking the measured, steady, responsible approach will continue to invite criticism from all directions that we're doing too much or not enough. The critics can say what they want, but the path I've outlined is the right path for Arizona. Here's the short of it. Arizona has taken the measured course, and all the same strengths that carried us through our worst days will carry us forward. All 50 states are focused now on saving lives, distributing the vaccine, and adding jobs. And in meeting these challenges, no state is better prepared than Arizona. In this new session, the legislature and I have some big pieces of business to complete, and I'll soon be sending the details of my proposals for 2021. But today, I know that many Arizonans are especially concerned about their kids and about their jobs. So let me begin there. It's been a small mercy of this pandemic that the virus is least likely to harm our children, although there are exceptions. Of course, their teachers are a different matter, and that's why we're making sure that teachers receive the vaccine as quickly as possible. Across our state, students have been kept out of their classrooms for long enough. They've lost out on childhood experiences that can't be duplicated on a computer screen. In strange, difficult circumstances, parents and teachers have done their resourceful best. But it's time to get our students back where they belong. With every public health professional, from Dr. Fauci and the CDC on down, saying that the safest place for kids to be is in school, we will not be funding empty seats or allowing schools to remain in a perpetual state of closure. Children still need to learn, even in a pandemic. By necessity, during this emergency, many parents have been more engaged than ever in the daily education of their children. Quite a few have found temporary educational options they want to make permanent. It's their right. Public policy should keep pace and empower them to make that choice. But still, other kids have fallen behind. There's been severe learning loss. Kids have missed out on so much. So let's put our resources on getting them caught up. Before COVID, we had an achievement gap in our schools, and it's only gotten worse. It's a problem detailed in a report just last week from one of the state's leading business organizations, with data showing the gap in student achievement often falling squarely down economic and racial lines. Distance learning has not been good for these students, who often don't have Wi-Fi or a laptop available. So starting now, let's direct resources to helping these children catch up. Summer school, longer school days, one-on-one targeted instruction, tutoring. It should be our goal that every student graduates high school on time and at grade level. This is consistent with the education innovation for which Arizona is known. At the heart of that movement is the idea that every child, regardless of background, is entitled to a great education and all the opportunities that come with it. Our independent spirit, after all, is one reason why so many people feel drawn to Arizona. They see that spirit as well in our respect for hard-working taxpayers and for Americans tired of living in states with high taxes, heavy regulation, low growth, and fading opportunity. Arizona has become the destination. And they're still coming to Arizona in 2021 because during the pandemic, we never took our small businesses or their workers for granted. As bad as things got, we're recovering fast. New businesses and residents have been added by the thousands. At this time last year, we were ahead of 45 other states in job creation and personal income growth. Today, we're still top 5, but some Arizonans are struggling, and it's got to be our priority to help them with a growing economy and more jobs. Every year I've been governor, we've improved income taxes in the taxpayer's favor. We've simplified the code, lowered all rates, protected them against inflation, and eliminated an entire tax bracket. In all of this, we've proven that our government can fulfill every obligation and answer the unexpected needs of a growing state without raising taxes. My goal has been to make Arizona the best place in America to live, work, and do business by letting Arizonans keep more of their hard-earned money. And having come this far, as other states chase away opportunity with their new taxes, why on earth would we ever want to follow their failed and depressing example? So I propose in this session, we work together to reform and lower taxes and preserve Arizona's good name as a responsible, competitive state. On tax reform, let's think big. In the coming weeks, legislators and I will have a lot more to talk over. There's general agreement, for instance, on COVID liability protection, so that a statewide emergency doesn't line the pockets of trial attorneys with frivolous lawsuits. There's also an opportunity for a modernized gaming compact that will bring in more revenue for our tribal nations and our state budget. Among other agenda items requiring our attention, let's work on broadband expansion, greater access to telemedicine, better roads and bridges, continuing to be a global leader on water innovation, better equipment and training for law enforcement, criminal justice reform, and guarding against wildfires so we stay on top of that ever-present risk. With remote learning by many state employees, we also have the chance to further limit the size, cost, and footprint of government. Let's truly shrink government by eliminating unnecessary state buildings and saving taxpayer dollars so we can prioritize areas of need, like educating our kids, taking care of our sick, and keeping our neighborhoods safe. We can complete all this and more in 2021, and I am ready. Our whole state is ready to get back on a rising path. Through the trials of 2020, we've kept our balance. We met every test. And even in an election year, we showed the best of our state's bipartisan tradition. If Arizonans are looking to this year with a feeling of accomplishment and optimism, it is because they've witnessed 2020 threw at us in the face of a global pandemic. Every day, Arizonans have demonstrated the true state of our state. Moms and dads, grocery store employees, and National Guard. We've seen heroism, sacrifice, service, and large and small. The state of our state is not only so let us not forget the challenges we face in the immediate. The nurses and doctors, tired and exhausted as they work overtime to save lives. The Arizonans who are grieving loved ones lost. We must all do our part by doing what we know works, following public health, wearing a mask, and practicing personal responsibility. With resilience and compassion, we move forward, allowing nothing to get in our way, and showing, in the end, the best kind of unity there is, the unity of caring about one another. Thanks for listening, and God bless.
A broad, sweeping state of the state address for 2021 from Governor Doug Ducey. A few proposals sort of hinted at here, but very few specifics, Justin, in terms of what we're going to see in this legislative session. He talked about education, talked about vaccines, talked about tax reform, but very few specifics in any of that.
Yeah, one thing to point out as well is he did not really deviate from that pre-written speech right there. And really the length of the speech, it is much shorter than we typically see in a state of the state address. This one was only about 20 or so minutes. Normally his state of the state addresses in the past, they've been about an hour. And Steve, as you were pointing out, a lot more detailed than this one. This one is just kind of that general, broad, sweeping, general ideas that he has.
Yeah, certainly he talked about the year of the vaccine, but didn't talk specifics about how we're going to roll out the vaccine even faster than we've been able to do. There have been delays and various problems and glitches with the system that itself, and trying to make sure that the people who are really prioritized actually get that vaccine. Didn't talk a lot of specifics on that. A few things in education that are certainly going to raise people's eyebrows. The governor saying we will not be funding empty seats. So we're talking about a budget that would kick in essentially in July when the state's fiscal year ends. So basically saying, or at least throwing a shot across the bow to school districts, saying if you continue to go remote in the fall and the vaccine isn't out there, the pandemic still isn't under control, you could face some severe funding shortages from the state itself. He's also hinting at providing some more resources to help students catch up, because what he calls severe learning loss. There are a lot of students who've fallen behind because of remote learning, of the constant back and forth here. He's hinting at providing funding for summer school, providing funding for longer school days, and tutoring as well. And so a number of initiatives that he's hinting at with education. It'll be interesting to see how that plays in school districts and among teachers themselves, and certainly parents out there as well, as to whether they want their kids in remedial programs over the summer, trying to just catch up from the learning they've lost in this past school year.
Yeah, one of the things that he was talking about was the vaccine, Steve. Actually, today, Maricopa County is starting to vaccinate teachers and cops as well, the day of his State of the State address. However, Maricopa County is seeing glitches in their system today. We've already heard of early morning glitches, folks having a hard time getting logged on to make their appointment to get that vaccine. We're moving into the second phase of folks getting that vaccine, but again, promising to get the teachers vaccinated as soon as possible.
And the other broad part of his State of the State address was what he called tax reform. He wants to lower taxes. He wants to shrink the size of the state government. He hinted at eliminating some unnecessary state buildings, although he didn't say which state buildings he deems unnecessary at this point. And tax reform is an interesting topic, with the budget currently still being debated in the state legislature, because we really don't know exactly what kind of impact the pandemic is going to have on tax revenue. It has not been as severe as was originally predicted by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee here, but again, trying to lower taxes when the economy is still struggling and getting back, that's going to be an interesting debate within the state legislature.
Yeah, he talked about criminal justice reform, wildfire suppression, and expanding broadband as well. Again, no specifics on those ideas yet.
We will continue to follow the legislative session and continue to ask questions of the governor's office for more information on all of these topics. As always, we want to thank you for joining us for this special edition of ABC 15 News, and we'll have reaction contribution from Arizona lawmakers coming up at 4, 5, 6, and 10.
Have a great afternoon.